Hello, traveler. Have you ever caught yourself trying with all your strength to force yourself to do something, and yet nothing happened? You sit down, you look at the task, you know exactly what needs to be done, but it is like some part of your brain just shuts off completely, and then comes the guilt, the judgment, that cycle of self-criticism spinning in your head. Why am I like this? Why can't I just do it? Well, here is the truth. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not disorganized or broken. What is happening is that your brain doesn't function under command. It functions under conditions, and understanding this single fact can completely transform how you deal with your motivation, your productivity, and even your relationship with yourself. And that brings us to today's lesson. Let's take a look at what is really going on inside your head. To start with, the human brain responds to stress in a way that scientists call a curvilinear response. This idea was formalized over a century ago by psychologists Robert Yerkes and John Dodson, giving birth to the famous Yerkes-Dodson law. And here is what it says. There is an optimal point of stress, an ideal zone that can't be too low and can't be too high. When stress is too low, you become unmotivated, apathetic, without energy. You are just drifting through your day with no real drive or direction. When stress is too high, you burn out, you crash, you become overwhelmed and paralyzed. But when stress is moderate, right in that sweet spot, that is when your body and brain enter a productive state. Focus sharpens, energy increases, mental clarity improves. Everything just flows better. So stress cannot exceed this optimal point, or everything falls apart. Cortisol levels spike too high. The sympathetic nervous system takes over control, and you enter fight or flight mode. In this phase, your brain no longer wants to think strategically about your to-do list or your goals. It wants to survive. It is scanning for threats, preparing for danger, even when the only danger is a deadline or an email you need to send. And this is exactly why the more you try to force yourself, the more it seems like your mind just freezes up, locks down, refuses to cooperate. And there is more to this. A large part of this fight or flight response comes from a region called the midbrain. This part of the brain is ancient, instinctive, primitive. It is involved in emotional, motivational, and defensive functions. It is the midbrain that triggers the fight or flight response, and it is also the part that decides whether something is safe or dangerous. The more you fill yourself with pressure, with shame, with self-criticism while trying to force yourself to act, the more the midbrain interprets this as a threat. It doesn't understand that you just want to complete a task, accomplish something on your list. It understands that you are under attack, that something bad is happening. And when this occurs, the rational part of your brain is essentially shut down, taken offline. That is why forcing yourself too hard generates the opposite effect. The more you try to push your brain, the more it defends itself. The more it avoids, the more it blocks. It is not that you are being lazy or resistant on purpose. Your brain is trying to protect you from yourself, from the perceived threat of failure or inadequacy. Another important factor is negative beliefs. Imagine what happens when a mundane task gets mixed up with deep negative beliefs about yourself. For example, let's say you need to put away clean laundry. Simple task, right? And then you start thinking, if I don't do this now, it is because I am a failure. Can't I even manage to put away my own clothes? What is wrong with me? Suddenly, that simple action stops being a mundane chore and transforms into a threat to your identity, to your sense of self-worth. Putting away clean clothes becomes a way of proving that you are worth something, that you have value, and the midbrain reacts as if your survival is at stake. The task becomes an emotional bomb, loaded with meaning it was never meant to carry. And paradoxically, the more important a task seems, the harder it becomes to start doing it. And it is not because you don't want to. It is because your brain believes that making a mistake, failing, or postponing would put you at emotional risk. And for the brain, avoiding pain is always more urgent than seeking pleasure. Self-protection trumps self-improvement every single time. And this brings us to 2 reasons for low productivity. Because when you feel like you can't get something done, It is often for one of these two reasons. Either you care too little or you care too much about the task. The thing is, caring too little can generate apathy, boredom, or a lack of purpose. Nothing feels meaningful, so why bother? But caring too much makes you emotionally overloaded. This excess of importance, this weight you've placed on a task, is a direct trigger for blockage, for shutdown. That is why people living with anxiety, with depression, people who have ADHD or other mental conditions, they know this pattern well. The more they pressure themselves, the more they try to be productive by sheer force of will, the more their body and mind react with resistance, because their brain under these conditions is already operating at a high baseline level of stress. So any new pressure is immediately interpreted as yet another threat, another danger to manage, and the result? Paralysis, guilt, frustration, self-criticism, a mental cycle that undermines motivation and destroys self-confidence, leaving you feeling worse than when you started. And the solution to this cycle seems almost counterintuitive, but it works. When you want to do more, the path isn't to increase effort, it is to decrease pressure. That is right. Because productivity doesn't arise from force. It arises from internal safety, from a sense of security. When stress is too high, the brain needs to feel that it can relax before it can engage again. This might mean simplifying your task list. It might mean establishing smaller goals, breaking things down into tiny manageable pieces. It might even mean admitting that today isn't the day, that some things are going to have to wait, and that is okay. That is not failure. That is being realistic. Reducing the emotional weight of tasks is what reactivates the reward system, what brings dopamine back online, what restores your sense of control. Because when the brain feels that something is safe and possible, that it is achievable without threat, motivation returns naturally, organically. It is a paradox. The less you pressure yourself, the more energy you have to act. Think about sleep, for example. You can't force yourself to sleep. Nobody falls asleep by sheer force of will, by commanding themselves to lose consciousness. All we can do is create the conditions for sleep to happen. Darken the room, turn off screens, relax the body, calm the mind. Well, the same exact logic applies to productivity. You can't force yourself to have focus, to manufacture concentration out of nothing, but you can create conditions that invite focus, that make it easier for your brain to engage. A comfortable environment, realistic goals, small breaks, and most importantly, the absence of internal punishment, of that harsh critical voice beating you up for not being perfect. When you stop micromanaging yourself, stop pressuring yourself constantly, and instead create a favorable environment, the brain feels it can trust you. It feels safe. And from that state of safety, it naturally wants to collaborate, to work with you rather than against you. Action stops being a struggle, a battle. It becomes a natural consequence of the right environment, the right internal conditions. So create favorable conditions. Set yourself up for success rather than demanding perfection. It also helps tremendously to remember the reason behind your tasks, the why underneath the what. Because at the end of the day, motivation doesn't come from willpower alone. It comes from the meaning we see in doing things, from the purpose that makes effort worthwhile. When you connect to why you are doing a task, to what good it brings, to the positive impact it generates in your life, the brain activates the reward circuit. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation, is released when we anticipate a pleasurable or meaningful result. So instead of focusing on the pain, the guilt, the self-criticism, the should and must and have to, try remembering what you gain from completing the task, the relief, the growth, the sense of accomplishment, the progress towards something that matters to you. Shift your focus from, I have to do this, to I want to do this because it takes me towards something important. This completely changes your brain chemistry. It transforms the task from a threat into an opportunity. So the next time you feel like you can't force yourself to do something, remember this: it is not weakness. It is biology. It is how your brain is designed to function. Your brain doesn't respond to shouting, to internal threats, to harsh commands. It responds to care. It doesn't work under threat. It flourishes in safety, in environments where it feels supported rather than attacked. So you don't need to push yourself harder. You need to hold yourself more gently, with more compassion, with more understanding, because it is from that space of calm, not from guilt, not from shame, that motivation, focus, and true productivity are born. Forcing yourself is fighting against yourself. It is creating internal conflict that drains your energy and leaves you depleted. But learning to cooperate with your brain, to work with its design rather than against it, that is the key to finally making things happen with ease instead of with suffering, with flow instead of with force. Stay safe, traveler. I'll see you on our next journey.